Welcome back to the Overwatch Summer Showdown here live in the beautiful city of Toronto here at the Mattamy Athletic Center. Oh my God, today has been a great treat already. But like Day and I are ready to serve you the next course. It's a rematch of the London Spitfire versus the Toronto Defiant.
Oh yes, so home teams finally going to walk out in front of their home crowd, Lemon. But last time, like you said, these teams met. It was 3-1 for London Spitfire. It was a huge upset. No one was expecting London Spitfire to be able to slap Toronto a Defiant around the way that they did. And in the end, it all came down to kind of Sparker being able to hit some massive stat cards during that particular battle. Over 13k damage per 10 minutes on the Sojourn during one of those maps. He was absolutely trouncing for Toronto Defiant. So the question is, this time around, are Toronto Defiant going to be able to try and turn around the tempo of these engagements and make sure that Hisu has enough space to work with?
Well, I had to talk to Toronto Defiant about this because I was like, you know, Moby Dick, the result didn't go well last time. What words do you have for your opponent? Now, besides, you know, the constructive stuff of not wanting to trip over their toes and wanting to improve over the mistakes they did against the London Spitfire, Moby said, "Dear Chris, it's Moby. You might have beat us last time, but now that we're in front of the fans, we're going to beat you this time in front of everyone." So this match means so much more. It's a lot of pressure on these players who haven't been on a stage like this.
Yeah, back in Overwatch 1, we talked about the 7th man being the crowd. Now we're down to the 6th man being the crowd. And a lot of players say that it is something a little bit different. It's a little bit of extra vigor in their step. And we've heard so many interviews from Toronto Defiant during their qualification run about how much it meant to them, how they were working extra hard. They're putting in the extra hours, doing the extra VOD reviews to make sure that they could be here in front of their home crowd and make it worthwhile.
Well, across the pond, it's the London Spitfire, who were kind of shaky this meta, not going to lie. And you thought, oh, the Rush Kings, surely this is going to fit them like a glove going into Junker Queen. But like when I talked to manager Nuki about this team and just how are they feeling going into this tournament, it's a big mental game for them. They're so confident in their mechanics and their understanding of the game. It's about just their mental. Like someone like Backbone, who we never really saw play Genji in Genji metas previously. And I was like, so what's up with Backbone? I think he looks awesome on Genji. Why haven't we seen this before? And she was like, it's all a mental game with these guys. And when you're young like that, you can maybe get frustrated with yourself. You got pressure, you got fans cheering or booing for you. So it's easy to make mistakes when there's so much on the line. So London, it wasn't about reinventing the wheel and getting different strats. It's about just mastering the fundamentals.
Well, from my opinion here as a Brit, Britannia rules the waves, and that includes Lake Ontario. Everyone in the arena around the world, please give it up for the London Spitfire.
Far away from home, but still confident, leading that charge, chatty. But then you got Backbone, who I think has done a tremendous improvement, is actually looking like a great duelist on the Genji. They all look 6'5", by the way. I'm on a box and they tower over me. Look at Chat. He wishes this was a Winston meta, but he'll be
batting his chest.
He's batting his chest in the game and out of game too.
Well, I'll tell you what about Howdy as well. Really interesting stat line. He's actually got the highest kills per 10 with the Carnage at the moment, which is kind of, it's reminiscent of his legendary status as one of the greatest Reinhardts in the game. Surely when it comes to the big melee damage that you get with the axe, with the Carnage, Howdy's the one delivering. And the question is, in this matchup, can Toronto Defiant turn it around to try and punish Howdy for going for those deeper melee kills with the axe?
And Admiral and Landon, although maybe rookies and not people you talk about too often, they're incredibly consistent. They do their job and they're people you can trust. A lot of these players come from British Hurricane, from Contenders, so they know each other for years. And even people who weren't on British Hurricane, they played in Contenders and they know each other. So the amount of trust that this team has, this is why they looked so good in previous Rush metas. Now coming in as a 5th seed, yeah, maybe they're not on top, but it's not about the seed, it's about how you finish.
Yeah, and when it comes to how you finish, you've got to manage to get on top of Hisu and finish off that Ashe before it can really do some damage, because Hisu on the Ashe that we know him to enjoy playing is really going to be trying their best to get continuous damage onto Backbone and shut him down. And that's one of the things that we're really looking out for Toronto Defiant in this rematch, as to whether they can try and either peel back and play a disengaging game to make sure that London can't completely control the tempo, or if they're going to potentially match that Sojourn, because we just saw in our last matchup right now how vulnerable teams can be to just being outsped. Washington Justice just kept bringing it to Dallas Fuel while Edison was on the Ashe, and eventually it had to be a swap over onto that Sojourn so that the tempo could be matched.
Well, your home team is ready. Ready, wearing red, seeing red is your home team. The North has arrived. Give it up for the Toronto Defiant. They're loud and they're proud. They're on the stage. The Toronto Defiant hitting the stage. Give them your love, Canada!
Rolling through the crowd, everybody wants a piece of the action when it comes to Toronto Defiant. They are the hot stuff in this meta. For my money, Lemon, Strong and Twilight, this duo in the backline, the Vibranium backline, the Adamantium backline, they are unbreakable in this meta. Twilight has a brain that has tenured over generations upon generations of competitive Overwatch, and every single time he's come out on top on the Brigitte, it's no different. When he chooses to put that rally in place, you know that it's a winning move. Twilight understands he's in the Matrix, and he is always being the one to tell Toronto Defiant, I have looked through the future, I have pondered the orb, and I can see the victory in this fight.
And they want to rewrite their destiny, because as you mentioned, London won their last rematch. This was, what, like a week or two ago? Time is a concept. So it was 3-1 for London, and Toronto showing up on the biggest of stages in probably a country they've never even been to before. Here's your starting lineup, and when talking to Moby Dick, the one person that really glues this team together is Twilight. The experience, the veteranship, the way that he takes care of his players in and out of game. This is a team play meta, and you gotta look to Twilight to unite this team once and for all.
Yeah, Twilight and Hopper as a duo here. When it comes to that experience, they are going to be unparalleled. Of course, Hopper, he's been in every single season of the Overwatch League on a cavalcade of different teams, but especially in our first 2 seasons, we were over in Barlet. It was lands every day. Hopper knows how to play in front of a crowd that is screaming his name. But I want to zoom in on although possibly the least name value for any player on Toronto Defiant, that is a short-lived title, because although when it comes to the Genji mechanics in this particular meta, he has been up and up and up and really impressing us with the ability to clutch fights that Toronto Defiant might not be able to win otherwise.
And Aldo from the shadows stepping up into the spotlight, because in previous metas it was Finale, but Aldo has been growing into the Genji role similar to Backbone. I feel like they both have a similar story of being known on other heroes, but then really becoming prominent on the Genji, which is so important in this meta to be a good duelist on the Genji, because yes, you're getting resources, but you also have to be smart. You can't be over antsy, and this was a problem that London had of just maybe going in too deep or wanting too much or being too quick in the fights. You really got to take your time. And Backbone and Aldo have been learning so much from their coaching staff, and this is a matchup I'm so looking forward to.
Interesting tidbit as well. Aldo actually was on London Spitfire in our 3rd season, so true. It's even though it's a completely different organization now, is a little bit of a battle against his original home in the Overwatch League. Of course, these are 2 very close seeds. Number 4 and number 5, Toronto did not get to pick their opponent going into their own homestand, so they were kind of left with London Spitfire as everyone else decided, we'll take anyone else.
Yeah, I mean, we even heard from Jaws that London is kind of this dark horse of, yeah, they had maybe a slower start to this meta. We really thought they were going to be top 4 and above because of how good they were at Rush when no other teams wanted to play that. And even just the team, London knows that Hadi has been adapting. I mean, every tank has had their trepidations of trying to learn the Junker Queen. First map choice goes to Toronto Defiant, having the better seed. It's 4th versus 5th, and we go to Ilios. They've only been to this map once this stage, and it was against the LA Gladiators, which Toronto had success on.
Mattamy Athletic Center, long have you waited for Toronto Defiant to come home to you as aspiring champions in their first ever map in front of your eyes. Send forth your energy.
It is all red. I'm ready to see red on the ground too. Map 1. I mean, we've already had a crazy day. The fact that the Justice game went to 5, and it was a 2-0 start when Dallas Fuller talked about being the #1 team or just even going all the way to winning it. But really, you got to throw all your expectations out the window when playing on a stage like this. There's different factors. It's a new environment. There's a crowd. There's noise, distractions, and everything. But the doors are about to open for our rematch of London versus Toronto. And you know it. Hisu's on the Ashe and Sparker's on the Sojourn. Let it rip.
And this is a big technical matchup here. How does Hisu get the space to operate against a very fast London Spitfire? Can Hisu find themselves a high ground, or will London Spitfire deny those angles entirely? Playing in the gazebo at the moment. Backbone's already doing a significant amount of damage, but Hopper, I believe, has already used their shout.
Backbone just applying pressure to Hoppa, who's completely surrounded by Spitfire members and not getting the resources. Toronto already starting to back away, but around the corner actually, but not really wanting to initiate anything without Hoppa. So London get the cap first.
Yeah, although we'll be able to skedaddle here with a good amount of ult charge, at least getting up towards that blade. But Hoppa will have to wait now another 11 seconds for that next shout to come up. Of course, you can do some poking in earnest before any of this is available. London Spitfire, though, they'll be able to control all of these defensive areas where they really want to deny Hisu some space to work with.
Oh, although already going after that Brigida, Hottie trying to protect his backline with everything he has, but he's the first to fall and Landon can't back him up. So that's a quick turnaround for Toronto.
Yeah, Hottie being the first of all really hurts because after that your disengagement is so much weaker. You don't get the additional speed from that shout as well. And oh yes, although sitting at 85% towards the blade, and look at London Spitfire support ultimates at the moment. Admiral and Landon are so far behind. If although decides to take a tempo blade here and strike first, Toronto could pick up a very quick second fight with which to farm their other ultimates.
Oh, and Toronto already wanting to initiate, and even just getting a dash or a few right clicks in is great for Aldo because 5% away from the blade. Now they can maybe create some distance, poke away, get up to the blade, and hope that Admiral doesn't have the barrier in time, and really got to judge the ult tracking of Toronto. Here's the first blade from Aldo, and all of London are grouped up. They use the shout from Hottie. They back away. Admiral has the sound barrier, and Aldo never killed anything. So London, like you said, can get maybe a tempo engage off the barrier coming up.
This is dangerous, though. Twilight just a little bit ahead on the rally, not enough for it to matter, but it's going to be sound barrier versus sound barrier. Trong is forced to move into a second barrier.
Beat engage for Admiral. Trong unleashes his second. Twilight with the rally and Landon as well. Resources expended and Admiral's first to fall. No speed for London as Hisu has been free-su to poke away at London and dismantle them one by one. But what is this? Landon, are you serious? Takes out Twilight. Very limited healing for Toronto, but is the job already done? You look at the point, it's 3 versus 2 and London back away, so Toronto hold the point.
Credit to Landon, though, that forced for usage of the Bob there from Hisu. Now contesting the point needs to be a risk of the health of Toronto Defiant when they move on to there. Huddy's just ahead when it comes to this rampage, but Sparker here with the overclock is actually going to be in a really good position to try and follow up those rampages at good range with a consistent rail shots.
Rampage first from Hoppa, hits 4, Hottie responds, hits 3, Landon down, no healers for London. It's 92% for Toronto as well. They just have to hold on a little bit longer, but Sparker has to shine. It's a headshot on Twilight. Sparker keeps this winnable.
No
you
way.
Look at the point. It's 4 versus 2. Toronto just needed to finish, but Sparkle ignites, and London are still in this.
London still have to stay on the point as well. It's overtime in favor of Toronto Defiant. Hopper will be sent reeling back to the spawn, and London Spitfire going to finally get their flip, but not without significant investment. Now the blade is the next ultimate that needs to be looked at and considered. How can it be countered by the Toronto Defiant? They have an extra boot, remember, in the form of a coach gun from the Ash, and that needs to be considered by Backbone, because now going up against a triple boop, and that can really mess with your locomotion when you're trying to get a blade that's not assisted by a damage boost.
And Backbone is ready to cover mid. The rest of London are covering the left side, so Toronto have to choose how they engage carefully. They don't have any ultimates, but they just have to survive this Backbone blade. Here it goes. Immediately after Hoppa, cuts him by the ankles. And here's Hottie to assist, and all the resources behind Backbone. The 1 kill is all they need to send Toronto packing for now.
Backbone's decision there to use a short dash as well to try and guarantee that extra 50 damage on Hopper and close the distance so he can't be outran was a great way to just read what is required of that blade. Only the 1 kill was needed. However, now although on the other side is going to be looking to achieve the same. However, this is going to be the last fight, Lemon. As we move in towards the 80% for London Spitfire here, all the cards need to be put down on the table, and the Bob is almost ready for Hisu as well.
And London have their support ultimates a little bit before Toronto, and that could make a big difference. All those blade, how will you pierce through this? Admiral has to be ready. Although getting into position, sees London approach near the mini pack side. Here's Hisu having the space as well. Although he already sees the sound barrier, he just has to survive, and this blade could be all-American and all-free. Toronto on the high ground, waiting to get towards the backline. He finds Landon, who activates the rally, and although gets nothing, but so does Backbone. The sound barrier from Toronto does give them some extra resource, some overhealth to work with, as now all things are equal, 4 versus 4. Admiral makes sure that his backline is safe. Good whip shot from Landon. Here's Toronto trying to boop someone in position, but Sparker headshots. Hisu,
but on the point.
Not a lot of damage and not a lot of people on the point. Toronto with round 1.
It was a big old bomb that forced on a Spitfire backwards. Yes, they survived, and yes, they killed the big old Nick Butler, but in the end, they lost the point, they lost their footing, and they've lost the well as we head over to stage 2. It's Ruins, Lemon, and this is another fantastic area for the Ashe. Some really long sightlines that can be exploited for locomotion towards that Ashe is a little bit more difficult because the point is in a depressed zone. That means Ashe can sort of play around the periphery and have themselves a high ground to work with.
And here's the final looks of the C9, if you want to call it. Zoning Blade, I know we kind of meme about it, but although kind of accomplished a lot if you think about it. I don't think we killed anything because of Admiral, but the way that London stepped away to respect that blade is what costed them the round. We enter Ruins, doors open. Let's take a look.
And part of the reason why they had to step away to respect that blade is actually what Bob forced for sound barrier beforehand, so they only had a rally to really deal with that. Look at Toronto Defiant here, and if they make a move to control the mega health pack, because that's so important for keeping Hopper alive.
Backbone is making his way free into the back line, but Hadi already dips the front line, so this could just be a front-to-back fight if you're looking at London. But they can't be too eager, and see how they're not dying. That's so important. You don't want to go in too deep once you get that first kill, because 4v5 is still winnable. London are playing smarter than they did before.
I think it's a misstep from Orvo as well. He picked up the mega health pack, and I talked about how they were making that play to control the zone. So Hopper was actually in that area with no cover and couldn't get the burst healing from that mega pack. Now he gets hit with a knife pulled on in. Hopper's taking so much damage.
Yeah, Hopper got a knife pulled by Hadi and was already forced to use Shout. This is going to slow down the fight for Toronto, as they just want to take shelter and not get pulled or maybe one shot by Sparker. And he has to be careful for knives too as he steps up for those picks.
Sparker very high on the charge towards the rail 100, but where is it placed? Not enough to take Twilight out, but it does leave him in the danger zone, Lemon.
London are playing this very measured. They get down to about half health. They respect that space, but Backbone is killable. Twilight assures of it. Great whip shot moment as Toronto step forward to clean up the rest. 5v4, taking control of Mega Pack is great. Hadi a little bit behind from the flock, but Aldo cuts through the back line and more as Toronto take back the point.
2 whip shot kills in one fight as well from Twilight. We talked about what the veteran brings to the table. And it's not just the calm mind, it's also the accuracy. Nobody escapes grease on Twilight's watch. Taking out the next as well. This was a large, oh, it's an environmental as well. Taking out Sparker, both the DPS slain. I'm the DPS now, says Twilight.
Twilight is so scary. He's not afraid to step up and put your whole team in a locker as a Brigitte. Like, I'm waiting to see Twilight just promoted to DPS. He has the attitude, but check out this. He's to just drop the bomb. London have to back away because the bomb isn't pretty deep. It's standing as a bodyguard in their doorway. They burn it down. Now London can move forward. Because of this time burning, Toronto have taken the lead.
Spark's actually built up a rail off of this Bob though, so have a look to see if there's any burst damage being delivered from Spark. There's the rally, popped by both sides.
And London need the space, need the resources, and Backbone finally has the blade. Sound barrier first from Toronto, and let's see if this can convert it to any picks as another barrier drops, and Backbone unleashes his blade. He goes immediately after Hoppa. Once that first tank domino falls, so usually does the rest. You also deny the win condition of the Rampage, as London are satisfied with this pick, and Twilight maybe tried to present himself on the point to extend that lead even further, but for now, London get the flip.
And that was all about London responding very well to that early Bob. They simply disengaged, didn't use either of their support ultimates, and that meant that they could draw even with Toronto Defiant when it went support ult for support ultimate. Now Hardy with the Rampage. We talked about how Hopper died in that denied a win condition, but now it's much harder for Hopper to get value out of that Rampage because London Spitfire can control their spacing incredibly well. With Admiral and Sparker up on the high ground, they're going to be incredibly difficult to catch with a Rampage.
Although, already pressuring the high ground kind of forces the London DPS to drop as they're really good at respecting that space, but one identification, Hadi rampages the backline. Twilight is toast, but London managed to get a trade, so it's 4-on-4 as Aldo gets another blade, but he's not getting the multi-kills, but man is he scaring the heck out of London, who are still anti-healed. It's 80% plus. If Toronto win this fight, they're setting themselves up to take the map.
Toronto, they flip the point in the middle of this match despite being down on personnel for quite a while. In the end, though, it's all about the cleanup that although can bring to the point. And now Hisu once more can poke away easily at London Spitfire as they have to put themselves in danger to touch this point with no ultimates.
Admiral can't touch. Is there anyone else there? Sparker! He does jump in, starts the overtime. Landon is around the corner. Hottie has to jump in. Dorado! They shut the door! And Dorado take map 1.
Their first map in front of a home crowd, and Toronto Defiant do not disappoint. They have been grinding for years to make themselves a team that Toronto could be proud of. And this first sampling, Lemon, it seems to be going pretty well.
There's another Canadian team here. Did you know that? The Vancouver Titans, but Toronto, they want to be the #1 in Canada. Hey, #1 in the league too. That's not too shabby. But for now, it's about showing up in front of the crowd, and it's already a good start. We're going to throw it to a break, and we'll see you after this. The Toronto Scarves are out, but so are the Claws. Toronto take map 1. It was looking close, but they're already starting to rewrite their script. But Toronto, 83% win rate on Control. This is their best game type. What now?
Well, I guess that they've prepped pretty heavily for the Ashe here, and they're thinking, okay, if we go there Paraiso, we can potentially hope that Toronto Defiant are going to be leaning heavily into that, and then the game plan that we've got to counter it will work out a little bit better. And maybe they just feel they've got really good control of the movement and their pathing towards things like point A, because we know that London are a team that, in their history this season, have had to rely very heavily on good pathing, because they've been playing a lot more Reinhardt than other teams. And with Reinhardt, you've got to path so efficiently to not lose your shield and lose out in poke fights, and that's incredibly important on Paraiso as well.
Yep, that is London Spitfire's choice. One more time, Paraiso, one of our newer maps in Overwatch 2. And just making sure Backbone's chilling. Smiles all around, but also not feeling, maybe the map one was a bit nerves, right? But I think after we just heard all the Toronto Defiant chants in the crowd, you kind of saw the Toronto Defiant players smiling, but it's important to also stay focused and not let any win get to your head.
Yeah, although I do think that there's going to be a quiet confidence coming to us as well, like Moby Dick really sort of like imbued that upon us, that he really believes that it's going to be a win, and that the 3-1 before didn't phase Toronto Defiant. They'd already been in a pretty good position in this meta, and to be fair, I think that Toronto's performance in this meta has been a little bit surprising. I didn't expect Aldo to be as powerful on the Genji as he has been, and when we saw Hisu like being an average Ashe enjoyer for a while, that there was a little bit of philosophical debate for a while as to what is more valuable, and since we might have a technical pause here, let's talk about what the Ashe brings to the table, because Ashe as a hit scan is very good at bringing damage on demand. There's no real charge up like you have with a Sojourn Rail that you have to charge up to 100, and it means you can continuously pelt the enemy Genji with damage and keep them from getting into positions that are too aggressive where they can really access the backline, and it keeps Backbone much more suppressed. So one of the things that we really have to watch out for here is how deep Backbone can go before it is far too much and he could just be burnt to death with a dynamite.
Well, we saw in Ruins just how deep Backbone went, and was not very bueno for them. We're going to Paraiso as our second map. Still first to 3, and there's still a lower bracket. So the story won't end here for either team. But yeah, you brought up Aldo, and maybe not the flashiest blades. We're not seeing the 5K, the good old nano blade days where I would just have my vocal cords fried. But the presence that Aldo has, the way he just forced the C9 on well, just because of how they were able to manipulate the position of London and quite literally corner them and make it so they didn't even have space to get on the objective. So that's what I really like about Toronto, but London also aren't getting too aggressive, minus like 1 or 2 mistakes from Backbone. They're really measured on how they give and take space. This has been a great match for both teams.
Well, Spitfire going to be starting off here on the defense, opting into the Sojourn instead of the Ashe here. So one of the things that we really have to look out for here as analysts and as an audience is where Spark is going to be putting this Disruptor Field, because the Disruptor Field is a really important piece of utility in this meta, because if you put it in the right place to bisect an enemy team, you can force the enemy Junker Queen to use their shout too early in order to give a speed boost to the rest of the team to move on through, or for the Junker Queen to disengage. And after the Junker Queen has used that shout, that's the go sign for the enemy Junker Queen, because they have such a huge advantage in the next engagement.
Here's this initial Widowmaker shot. Sometimes you get lucky. It's like bingo. It's like 1% chance. And then you also get to convert maybe some ult charge. You really just saw Hottie there. Sometimes you even go for shot number 2, because you never know. Okay, you get Hottie half health. That's kind of cute, but he'll be healed back up, so it's fine.
Yeah, and Hisu gets to start off with a premium on ult charge. Not terrible, also keeping those flicks warm. London Spitfire here. Not getting overly aggressive, but Backbone is he is testing himself a little bit and almost got himself into the back line.
This is an interesting spot to take a defensive fight. Usually you let the attack come to you, but I think London wanted the initiative, and it's weird that Sparker is the first one to die. Chorong is not afraid to jump in your back line and see who he can duel, and winning that against Sparker is kind of massive for Toronto. But on their journey to the objective, they've lost a few members. Hisu, Hotba. This is just a dead fight for Toronto. But because London lost a few members, they're not exactly going to position near the bridge, and rather near the point now.
Yeah, aggressive positioning here is off the cards, but that's a really good 2-stage engagement there onto Hisu. You had Backbone engage first, knowing where Hisu had to go, because he could have gone in even deeper. So when he disengaged, he was right into the path of Landon, who could deliver the melee DPS to get that killing blow. Now Toronto Defiant, they aren't close to any ultimates. What they don't have to do is battle through the high ground. This is an ideal fight for them.
Oh, Backbone got found. Great headshot by Hisu. He has one of the highest crits on Ashe as well, and Landon's just toast. This is such a free fight for Toronto, and all they have to do do was walk up while London lost control of bridge. So great fight by Toronto.
It's all about that attrition, like you were saying, Lemon. London Spitfire, they could not move forward to control that high ground, and so the pathing forward for Toronto Defiant was absolutely free. They didn't have to use a shout or a speed boost in order to actually access the point, and that means that both of those amps were available for Toronto Defiant in the actual fight in those narrow areas where you can really get massive cleave damage.
Aldo's been positioning quite aggressively as well, just going on off angles to kind of surround London. But look, London go underground, and now they're behind the car. They try to catch Hotba off guard. It's a good disruptor shot from Sparker. All the pressure is on the Hotba. They get that trade, but not before Sparker gets headshot by Hisu. So it's a 4v4, but Toronto, the attack without a tank. Spawn room doors around the corner, and they don't want to get trapped. They invest the ball behind London just to force London's attention behind them, so Toronto don't get spawn camped, which would cost them some time.
Yeah, an amazing bisection as well. Landon gets isolated. He won't be back for a while. Sparker, well, London knew that they could not hold that spawn, even if they did win the fight without Sparker. The long-range damage is so important for being able to put down suppressive fire on those spawn doors. Although now has a blade ready to go, but London Spitfire have both of their support ultimates that can be used, and there's no Bob beforehand to try and force something out of London. So all those likely to be mitigated here, he needs to stay safe during his blade.
It's the last fight for B, so London have to burn a lot of time here. They got kind of rolled at the start, but Backbone, it's time to do some bulldozing himself. He is on fire and not in a good way. That dynamite lit him up. So he really forced out a barrier, but not the rally. Admiral also had his barrier forced by Aldo's blade. No one died. London, though, they're still on the defense and they're still holding.
Yeah, because of a need to use that Bob to break the spawn hold, now Sparker has an advantage against the lack of support ultimates. A rally's popped by Twilight, but a disengagement from London, they're not going to counter rally.
Hotba wants to draw everyone into an alley for this rampage. He catches Sparker, Admiral, and Landon. Landon's rally trying to keep the team up. Howdy counter engages. He gets a 3-man or 4-man anti. The supports from Toronto affected, but above is Sparker. He needs to hit the shots for London, and he converts on a few, at least 2. And Toronto dead in the water this fight with 2:40 left.
Oh, Toronto fans, they remember this stimulus. Sparker up on high ground, absolutely farming on the Sojourn. No killing blow onto Hisu. And that is a prayer given over to Toronto Defiant. They can make more time happen out of this. But London Spitfire, they've been completely spent. Look at those ult charges. Landon's the highest on 31%. Hisu's going to be the next to try and make something happen. And that's a well-facilitating dynamite.
Yeah, that was an expensive last fight. Now it's just all vanilla. Really, how can these Genjis maybe try and duel up against Backbone is pretty close to Hisu. Hisu sees that, drops on the other side. Backbone is on the hunt. Toronto fall back to Peel, but Backbone's already assassinated Hisu, and he goes after the reinforcements. He's solo killing people, and Toronto's like, I ain't want that smoke. That's not me. I ain't that guy. So Backbone really found a great opportunity for the defense.
Oh, and the last Shuriken as well takes out, although just extra ult charge and extra waiting time for the Toronto Defiant. And Hisu wasn't able to hit that many shots over the course of that fight. London Spitfire actually took fights in isolated areas that had physical cover from Hisu, making sure that he was at least a little bit isolated in those battles and couldn't help out others from range. And now London Spitfire, they've retaken the high ground. Toronto Defiant need to invest heavily in terms of their resources and their movement to take these areas. So Aldo and Sharong have to play as a duo here to even try and wrap around onto Sparker, and that means that pathing for Hotba's much more dangerous.
You brought up the good parts about Ash, but how about this? You don't have as many, you don't have as much mobility as a Sojourn. So this part of the map is so close range that London can instantly pounce on Hisu. But Toronto have learned, they drop the Bob to stop London from jumping on top of Hisu. Toronto need Hisu in this fight for all the damage he can provide. Rally first from Landon. The fight has started. They picked off Hisu. They're going after the back line. And I mean, Hoppa can't do anything if London just walked past them. All those like, maybe I can push this card a little bit further, but this is another done fight. Back to back to back wins for London.
The spine that was promised continues to pick up the killing blows, and now Backbone will be rewarded for all of that with a blade. Sharong and Twilight, they are just a hair's breadth away from getting the support ultimate, so it would save Toronto Defiant from a blade-borne onslaught, and maybe potentially Sharong could get a beat that would also facilitate all those counter blades here. But the question is, how much much will Toronto Defiant lose on their way in? Because Spark is building up towards another rail. If he hits a body shot with that, he's ready for an overclock, and that makes the path to the cart where everyone has to be so much more dangerous.
Yeah, Landon's initiative on the rally was important last fight, but Toronto have the advantage here. They start with the rally and the blade, and it's already one kill. Hoppa leads the charge on the front line, and he's flattening the faces of London, who just decided to only use the blade and give this one up. This was an overtime push, though. Several minutes costed Toronto to get to this point. They'll have a little bit more for C, but it's a long road ahead.
Admiral and Spark are deciding not to invest their ultimates and trying to clutch up. It's a long-term view from a London Spitfire, a macroeconomic fiduciary bit of responsibility to not invest when they were already down backbone, knowing that without the dash resets to move between targets, they were unlikely to be able to follow up very well on the ultimates that they had available. Now Toronto Defiant, they need to try and find a way to extract value from this rampage.
As soon as Toronto rotates right, London tried to cut off their respawn, or cut off their rotations, and weren't successful at getting back any kills, as Toronto used their resource to rotate, and also the right door to get back to the cart. There's so much attention from London onto Hisu. Look how they just speed past Hoppa, and then try to go after Hisu. Rampage to rampage, and that's a massive one from Hoppa and Hottie, and there's just no one left alive. Toronto have to just hide in their spawner doors.
Hottie uses the knife to pull Hisu away from the invincibility area, so he dies to the bleeds. Hoppa, yes, can brawl up in the front lines, but they don't really have many tools on the way of Toronto Defiant to really force themselves forward. With no shout with London Spitfire waiting here, this is incredibly perilous.
London are always pulling the trigger first on these fights. Is it paying off, though? But that means also so much real estate for Sparker to just sit back and not have anyone get close to them. Although it's not being able to pressure Sparker, but look at Toronto already with the first pick in Hoppa. As soon as London approach, he holds his ground, and London sees some signs of life.
I think London Spitfire may have overplayed their hand in terms of the confidence there, pouring out through the choke into Toronto Defiant's effective zone of control, but now we're in overtime. The spawns are going to take longer, Lemon, and Toronto Defiant, as we get further in, they're going to get further and further away from their spawn room. Every single kill will count for so much, and Sparker can deliver them readily using the overclock.
Rally to rally, Toronto getting a free, they're already halfway to C. When are London going to choose to fight? They were on the high ground, but now at the end, they get pummeled by the Hisu Bob, who sets up at the end. London just commit the overclock to burn the Bob down. Now this card has not stopped pushing this entire time, so London need to win this fight or this will be a full cap. And it starts off the way of Backbone. Already 2 kills for the defense, and a blade on the menu next. Toronto present themselves forward, but this was a done fight to begin with, as London stopped the full capture from Toronto.
Tactically utilizing the reality of overtime, Lemon, knowing that while that overclock is online, Toronto Defiant, they've been conditioned. Fear the Sparker, fear the rail, so they all hang back. And they leave Hopper alone to just keep that car contesting. Yes, that car is moving, but it also means that there's no one to back up Hopper, and he can be easily focused down by all of London Spitfire as they take their time to wrap around the car and make sure Hopper's got no disengagement paths that are at all palatable. Now, Toronto Defiant, it's not unwinnable. They've got themselves a respectable push here on Paraiso.
I was kind of worried about where London decided to take that fight, because like I said, it was just an unstoppable push. But the difference between Ashe and Sojourn is that Sojourn can take advantage of super long ranges, and I think they set up Sparker at the end of point C for that reason. You had to spend a bit of your overclock to deal with the Bob, but if you manage to still get overclock value after the Bob's been dealt with, it ended up working out. And even if Sparker can't finish off kills, Backbone will. If you set up your Genji for success for those dash resets, that's where London really found their success. But they chose that moment almost too carefully, because that was almost a full push by Toronto. So London have to go almost to the end to equalize the series.
Yeah, this is the dangerous part here, Lemon. Point A, with an Ashe defending it, is a very tough cookie to take a bite out of. Hisu will be able to tax you incredibly toughly as you try and move through his zone of influence, and it means that you have to expend so many resources like the amp it up and like, oh, that's not the grapple Backbone wanted. Yeah, it's a little bit of a giggle there from Backbone. It's okay, bud, no one saw.
It's not like those Widow shots, I forget anything anyway, but to do that in front of a crowd, yeah, I would uninstall. I'm just kidding. But London, now they can just maybe, it's hard for Sojo to attack here. You don't have the dynamite you can throw over, but that pull means a lot. Hadi pulls in Twilight to the line of fire, 5 versus 4, and not a lot of healing without that Brigida player. Toronto disengages around the corner. Sparker, man, he is lighting up. He's got a ton of charge, and Aldo finds himself completely out of rotation away from the team. He tried to take an off angle, but Toronto went the other way.
Yeah, it was a botched call on the disengage, and Sparker still reigns supreme, baby. Sweden's gift to Esports continues to hit those killing blows, but that was all about the Hardy magic hitting the knife on Twilight. I don't know what happened, but Twilight was caught without his shield up. Should have been 3D peeking maybe with that. Alas, the Brigitte pulled down to the low ground and quickly finished off. And you can see that Sparker and Backbone, they've been rewarded so heavily in terms of their ult charge. But the real question here is how aggressive can London be in terms of claiming this high ground away from Toronto Defiant and forcing them to spend resources in order to claim it back?
Yeah, that's important of who is having that high ground control. For now, it's Toronto, but London kind of just jumping up, seeing what they can find. It's a little bit of game of duck hunt when you're watching Sparker play. And I like that he has his Brigida shield, so he kind of has some protection if Aldo decides to apply some pressure, which he hasn't been doing as much of that lately. I feel like Backbone takes more risks, can be a liability, but can also reward the team. London now rounding this corner. Toronto put a stop to that, and they're ready to fight.
All right, Hisu on one angle, Aldo on the other. There are no unattended paths here for London Spitfire to try and move through. But look at this, Sparker falls low, gets the armor pack, and now Toronto's in a dangerous position alongside Aldo.
Backbone just tried to harass Hisu, and Twilight said none of that. You are not invited over anymore. Toronto, and especially Chorong likes to go and harass people. Sometimes he wins that duel against Sparker, and if your Lucio can do that, that's kind of sick, but Backbone's like, enough of that. But he meets Bob around the corner. That is not who you want to meet in the dark alley, but the Bob is quickly burned down. Without Hoppa, Toronto don't have a tank. They don't have a front line. They need to stay safe for this final fight.
Hisu with that Bob, they may have actually given Toronto enough time to play this out because Chorong was saved by that Bob. Sparker, this is such an aggressive angle. London are just taking the land away.
Oh, I thought Sparker was going to kill Twilight there. He needs to stay alive for the rally coming up. Toronto holding well as London are playing cat and mouse. Brigida's exchanged. And then Sparker with the overclock. He gets to sit back and be happy. But look, London just kind of shoved Toronto back into the point C area. And Toronto will have maybe a recontest, and they touch at the very last second.
Now we got to worry about the boops. It's going to be Admiral who's responsible for them. Backbone goes too deep, but Hopper's turned around on the other side. It's Sparker with the rail. Aldo draws the blades.
Oh, and everyone's solo from London. But Aldo, he doesn't want to take that risk, especially without Hoppa here. This could be a lost fight. So Toronto are done with this. They're happy.
Now Hisu taking up the responsibility of just making sure that can't be snuck on forward. Hopper readied with the Rampage. London, if they put themselves onto this cart, they're going to be very vulnerable to large spacing.
Hoppa said, what's up? What you guys cooking? The Rampage towards his own team. Hadi follows along. He pulls Hoppa into his loving arms, but I don't think Hoppa wants the date. He is anti-healed, but Toronto never die. What a job from Chorong and Twilight to keep this fight alive for Toronto.
And Hopper as well realized that he went too far, was hoping to drag in members of London Spitfire, thinking, oh, Hopper's inting, let's just, let's take care of that. And then turns around with the old 180 and Rampages back. How did you get more value out of that Rampage? The thing is, because Hopper had already antied people, London Spitfire didn't want to move forward into that enemy zone to actually follow up upon it, so Huddy didn't have as much backup as he would elsewise like.
Hisu is the only one with an ult. He has a Bob, but I guess Toronto's supports just fall over? How does that happen? Maybe they presented themselves to go for a whip shot, but without supports, this is just a done fight. London get point B. There's no saving this for Toronto. You're farming ults and you're thinking about point C.
3.5 minutes to think about as well, though, and we are far flung from the overtime take of point B. Chorong, given the armor packs, it's all reliable. It's Twilight who keeps his Lucio alive. Thank you, sir. Hisu with the Bob. Where do you put it here? Do you want to try and use it to try and force on the Spitfire forward and make sure their disengagement path is going to be incredibly perilous because of the auto damage that Bob does? Or do you want to use it mid-fight instead when London Spitfire have already used their engagement tool so they can't disengage effectively from that Bob?
I like the mid-fight distraction that you're talking about with the Bob, but more importantly, just manipulating the position of the other team. As soon as London go forward, Hisu's Bob meets them at the front. London respect that. They go back, and you know, it's actually the defense on the cart right now as London find themselves on the wrong side and also cut off from their own spawn.
Who's on what side? What year is it? London Spitfire almost have 4 ultimates ready to try and break through here, and only Twilight and his rally will stand in their way.
Oh, rally to rally though. Resources equal, but Hadi's taking a lot of heat, so Admiral has to drop the barrier, especially against all those Blade. But Backbone, he got the barrier too, and he hasn't been able to cut through any of these resources. And London still find themselves cut off from their own spawn. Well, at least they have access to the door now, as Toronto not really sure how to control this space. Hoppa moves away from the disruptor shot as Sparker hopes to disrupt this fight with the overclock. It's back-to-back kills for London. 5 versus 2, and Toronto only have 2 minutes left to defend.
Oh, Hisu staggered there as well. Hardy eventually getting the killing blow. The fact is, London Spitfire, that was not an amazing return for the 3 ultimates they used at the beginning. Only the overclock really starting to find those killing blows, and that means Charong now, he's going to be able to just hold on to his sound barrier until Hardy uses that rampage. There's going to be no other onus, no major stimulus, which forces Charong to play his hand early and to call the bluff of London Spitfire. However, when we look at the distance, this could be the last fight for London if they can eke it out.
Well, where did Toronto want to engage? The card is pushing Toronto. Oh my god, okay, they got at least Hoppa is there. The barrier drops on Turong, and Toronto run London over like a truck. And finally a fight win for Toronto on this point. See, after so many seconds have been exhausted, but London have many more chances with 1:15 left.
Okay, London getting a little bit smart there, knowing they didn't have the ultimates to try and win that battle, so instead they went for a split, trying to drag in Toronto super deep to chase those kills, while a couple actually moved off to hit the car instead. Toronto Defiant, they are still at least with a semi-filled war chest with the Rampage and the Bob, but Hardy here, if he can hit himself a top Rampage, Charong's already used that sound barrier now to engage. It's not going to be available to counter Hardy's aggression.
This might be tricky for Hardy's Rampage. Do you want to take it on the low ground? Do you want to hit him on the high ground and draw the fight down low? Toronto have ways to disengage, but they're the ones who initiate. They throw the ball forward, they split London in half, and they tried to send Ovo to finish the fight, but it's Hotba's Rampage that slowed London down. But without London's rally, London are dangerously low, but it's the damage that striked finally for London as the box of victory is in their sight, and the London, no, that's a last second touch. I was almost ready for that to be a map win. Toronto, though, just had me going. London Spitfire will tie the series.
A last second touch after a celebratory sound barrier is not enough. On their own map pick, London Spitfire decided that the beautiful beaches of Paraiso were going to be where they would even up the series, and yes, there will be no sweeping today for Toronto Defiant. Though we're far from a 3-1 we saw before, now Toronto Defiant will be able to pick their own location going over to Escort and demand maybe an Ash versus Ash on something like a Dorado.
I ain't trying to curse. I don't want to try to get booed in front of the Toronto audience. I'm going to say this real low so they can't hear me. But Toronto won the control map last time, and then London rolled them the next 3 maps. Is this going to be the repeat of history? We're going to throw it to a break, and we'll find out after this. see the Overwatch script is all going according to plan. Toronto wins control, and then London win the second map. We just like to keep things a little spicy here in Toronto.
Yeah, it's an unfortunate flashback, though, for a couple of Toronto Defiant fans. Did you ever get that feeling of deja vu?
No, mate. Was that a good accent?
Yeah, it's okay. We take those. And actually, I got a feeling of premonition as well, Lem, and I anticipated that as we go over to Escort that we might see Toronto Defiant try and force us to Dorado, because that's an area that's very good for Ash. Some really good sightlines and some high grounds that can be quite difficult for a Genji to path up to without actually using his dash, because the wall climbs can be a little bit finicky, and that makes it a much more dangerous proposition for a Genji, because he can be tracked very easily as he makes his way up to those high grounds. And when you go for Hisu versus Sparker in an Ash battle, usually you're going to be preferring Hisu here. Hisu actually has our most time on the Ash in the league by a huge margin. Over an hour of gameplay time in this meta, more than anyone else on the Ash.
Well, speaking of map stats, we already knew Toronto were like mid on Paraiso because they actually got full health by Vancouver Titans. But when it comes to Dorado, this is Toronto's map pick. They have had great success on this. They have defeated the Boston Uprising and the Houston Outlaws on this very map. So Toronto are sticking to their strengths.
Doesn't surprise me that Toronto have done so well here in this meta. Like we said before, it's an Ash's playground, and Toronto Defiant, if they can get aggressive, they can give Hisu so much space to work with, and when Hisu has space to work with, that means that Backbone doesn't, because you're getting consistent damage onto the Genji. It becomes too nervous to try and make those risky dash plays, knowing that if he has to brawl afterwards, the likelihood of survival is incredibly low. However, it's going to be Toronto Defiant who are starting off here on the offense.
Kind of watching Paraiso, I actually felt like London were the ones who were stepping up and trying to go after Hisu more, and that's where Twilight really had to get his peel on. And they had to kind of just punish London every step of the way. That's why Backbone looks like he's dying a lot more than Aldo, because Aldo gets to sit back and just peel for Hisu, or see what Hisu's opportunities can create, and Aldo can follow up afterwards. Or you just go full punish mode and wait for London to act first. But that's how I think London were able to kind of manipulate and almost puppeteer these fights when they get to control and have a say on how everything goes.
The Toronto Marionette should become Toronto Defiant here. A quick TP up to high ground, courtesy of Aldo. This gives Hisu a nice little zone from which to exact his will. You can see that Backbone's consistently taking that damage. That is a beautiful shot from Hisu and the Cloud. Yeah, they're getting their clap on. That's our hit scan. That's our hit scan.
Hisu has the most amount of time out of every player in the league when it comes to Ash, but he also has one of the highest crit chances. I think something like 20%. And you see like a lot of Hisu's kills are just these random headshots. So it's really awesome to have someone dependable like that on the team, because that first pick basically guarantees you that you're going through bridge, but London are still holding this space even being down a person. And look, Backbone tries to present himself in the backline, and Toronto know this is coming. This is the style that Backbone plays, and Aldo has to protect his team. A Sparker falls to Hisu, and the picks continue Toronto's way. With respawn advantage as well for the attack, they can keep this going forever.
Chirong, though, was punished for going for a very aggressive boop on London Spitfire as they made their way around this high ground. You can see, although, getting a little bit of poke to begin with here. However, London Spitfire, they are uncowed in their attempts. Spark is going to be rejoining them soon, so it's just a little bit of an S as they move on back, wait to go back to full strength, and then retake the high ground to make sure that Hisu doesn't have these easy areas to operate from.
Yeah, Backbone was kind of contesting the car, and he dashes in. I'm not sure if he got the reset, and this has been tough. Toronto are just surrounding them. They're still trying to punish Backbone, and they finally do. London finally gets removed from the card, but not before taking half of Toronto's time bank.
Seemed like that might have been a little bit of a comms issue for London Spitfire as well. They got the opening pick onto Twilight, and after that, the lack of burst healing from the lack of repair packs for Toronto Defiant should have made stringing together those kills from London Spitfire so much easier. They couldn't really pick a target to focus on. I think that this first point is going to be seized away, Lemon. And now Toronto Defiant are going to be able to move on to point B with London Spitfire once again, just calmly controlling the high ground here, knowing that they can't allow Aldo to set up here and maybe create a safe path for Hisu to be able to move on up. The Bob's going to be interesting as his access to the high ground is incredibly limited, and thus maybe we'll see Hisu actually play the Bob a little bit later in a mid-fight scenario to try and take care of London Spitfire who dive in.
Well, diving on in is Bob, who meets a few London Spitfire members down that alleyway. And London we're on the high ground, immediately drop. Backbone's almost a little bit too deep, so Toronto get to sit back, just poke him down. Now Toronto have access to the high ground, they have cart push, and London, they're sitting in bank.
Oh. Zerong taken down by Sparker. And once again, getting that feeling of deja vu, Lemon, as Hisu is forced to give away that high ground over to his better half. London Spitfire yet to invest an ultimate here on the Toronto Defiant side. Of course, they have used that Bob thus far. However, London Spitfire, if they can control the high ground here with Backbone, it means that Toronto Defiant are more likely to have to use an ultimate to break through that.
Ooh, Backbone steps up. All those okay, he's getting packed up. Now above, it's London and Backbone with the blade, forces out the barrier from Torong, and that's fine. Backbone backs away, and Toronto now back on the car. Around the corner, though, is Hottie with the Rampage, and drawing out all these support ultimates from Toronto could be a sign of success. Although goes in, 86 HP, goes after Sparker, who jumps on out, and the barrier from Admiral saves the entire team, and London rolls them.
I love how Admiral actually held onto that barrier for a couple of seconds longer, not instantly reacting to the blade. Naturally, it was a little bit of a risk for Sparker, but he pre-packed him as well, using Landon to make sure that Sparker had a better chance of surviving. And they did that so that Toronto Defiant would be sort of tempted into over-following in that particular engagement. And it meant that they could get these early picks onto people who were positioned far too aggressively like Twilight. And then the snapback, like the elastic band snap for London Spitfire when they finally got that sound barrier, was on a Toronto Defiant who could not disengage effectively.
An ult advantage for London. So again, they always pull the trigger first, and the Rampage redirected towards Toronto. 4 members hit. The rally from Twilight, the disengage from Toronto. They only lose, what, 1 member, if anything at all? I think Toronto are fine. And now with this rally started, they might want to take this fight now that the overhealth is there. But what do you got to work with? You just have a Hopper Rampage.
The overhealth, the Hopper Rampage is brought right in, but Sparker can answer this with the overclock.
Oh my god, that bash from Twilight to get Landon on the ground, but Landon had a rally. London had support, and Sparker has the shots. Toronto fall 1 by 1, and they have 2 minutes left to go to B.
Oh, what a response from the London Spitfire. Landon tracked that so well, seeing that Twilight was getting aggressive after Hopper used the Rampage, going for the counter bash, knowing that I've got a better capacity here to try and get the damage onto Twilight because I've got Sparker in my pocket and he has the overclock. Lining up those headshots, you can instantly try and burn through even the overhealth that was left over from a rally beforehand. Now, once again, Toronto Defiant, they have to deal with a Huddy on the high ground who can freely reign over this damage, but Huddy being up here too means that Aldo can't get too aggressive because he can get carnaged.
Yeah, I mean, as soon as he blew himself up. He said, I'm not going to let you get ult charge. I'm going to take myself out. But London just looming on this high ground makes it so Hisu has no space. Like, Aldo needs to get Backbone off of Toronto's back.
No one kills Hisu but Hisu. You'll know the rules. London Spitfire, once again, they're just making sure that every single inch Toronto Defiant have to walk through here is hard fought for. And Backbone almost has the blade. There's no way to answer it from Toronto Defiant apart from maybe a Bob. Remember, the knock-up during that can do a good amount of damage and might be a good counter to Backbone if he decides to go too deep.
Yeah, you can't let Backbone on that high ground. I think Aldo's keeping him in check. The first blade to Backbone goes after Churong, and Hottie squashes Hotba. So a 5-on-3. London, though, going a little too deep, but honestly, just losing Admiral is totally fine. You don't have to really back away too much from this, but London keep initiating every fight, and Toronto just sat in there watching.
And now London Spitfire, they can play the schoolyard bullies. They have sustain upon sustain. Admiral with the sound barrier, Landon almost with the rally. Toronto Defiant, they need to survive long enough for Twilight and Churong to be able to bring their own sustainability. No way!
My God! No. Not on land, bro! Not on land!
Toronto defying the need to touch the objective. I'm not quite sure that's what they were going for with the name Lemon, but that's a sadness.
So there are a few different things happening. So with Toronto, we're trying to adjust their presence on the high ground. Hisu went all the way behind, went up the staircase, went along the ledge. He wanted to help Aldo on that high ground. Hoppa was probably, I'm not sure. I guess it's really up to Hoppa and Churong. I have zero idea why Toronto were not on that cart because it's right in front of them, right? Like,
we've got a nice scenic shot here of Dorado waiting for you as well with Alama and Alerta, and I certainly am feeling both of those after that. Remember, Toronto Defiant, this was their map pick. This is where Toronto Defiant believed they had the best chance of sending the London Spitfire into a tailspin, and their record on this against teams like the Houston Outlaws have been very good. Let's have a quick insight into how this objective malarkey happened. Oh, Hopper just
Hopper thought he got the touch.
Oh, it's the disruptor shot! Oh, we talk about the value of that, but I'd never imagined that it would be a round-winning disruptor shot.
Maybe he thought he had the touch too. I don't
Maybe.
know. It looked close.
Yeah.
But
could have been.
no cigar.
I'm sure the Reddit scientists, well, I've got top men on this. They'll figure it out.
That is not a far push for Toronto.
This is for Dallas TP.
Are they TPing right?
It's a fake.
Just kidding, Jabate. Toronto are actually right above the cart too, so they can drop onto London at any time. So Sparker has to be careful where he positions, but also that Sojourn has a lot more mobility than Ash and can actually get away pretty easily. Now the disruptor shot drops just to get Toronto right around the corner, just away from that area. But Toronto are waiting to engage, and they actually go to punish Backbone, who dives into the back. Do they get the kill? He's very low, but as everyone is distracted from flanking, it's London that play front to back and end up winning the fight.
All right, chatty moment right here. What tracking he had on although to hit the first Carnage. I talked coming into this particular matchup, Lemon, about how Hardy is a melee DPS tank through and through. He's got the highest Carnage kills per 10 in the league right now. I think it's about 6.7 per 10 minutes. And well, that's obvious for such an aggressive Reinhardt player. He loves to get up in faces, and he knows how to play the fear factor, how to intimidate his enemies into moving exactly where he wants them for everyone else to follow up on.
Oh, Aldo is getting harassed by Backbone. Aldo concedes. He's half health. London meters away from point A and anchoring themselves down. Toronto don't have ults and they don't have space, but they try and punish Backbone, but he's so wiggly. They just can't seem to lock Backbone down. But first support ultimates land, and as soon as he gets it, he pops it, and this is going to overwhelm Toronto. But just in time is Twilight with his own rally, and now they just get to coalesce into London. Hisu has the space to set London ablaze,
no way.
But Sparker redirects, but Hisu gets the last laugh, and Toronto hold.
That was a perfectly timed shout as well from Hopper when he was caught within the second use of that disruptor shot. And it gave the additional speed that Toronto needs to get onto those more vulnerable members of London Spitfire, including a Backbone who, like you said, was being so slippery. They needed that speed to catch up with him and actually pin him down into a fight. Now it's going to be a tale of two blades in this forthcoming battle. But the Bob is going to be such a good countermeasure here from Hisu, because you can simply put it up against the gate at the back and it will pepper fire into Backbone while he's trying to get value.
Oh, Backbone kind of double jumped, almost hit the wall, and I thought that would have been a moment, but Hisu's in the middle of throwing a dynamite, so couldn't get the headshot, but he puts the Bob right at the choke as London activate the sound barrier, and I thought Aldo was going to want to wait for that, but Backbone doesn't wait a second. He's blading the backline. Aldo does the same thing, but he was anti-healed by Hottie, so although you can heal him all you want, it's not going to work. So London waited, and it paid off. They will be getting point A.
On the Spitfire there, they managed to drag everyone into an area where how do you get good value out of the Rampage by using the Blade first to really try and force Strong into using a less than ideal beat. In the end, London Spitfire, yes, they use a lot to win that fight, but thinking over the course of the 3.5 minutes they have to do essentially half of point B here, Lemon, it's not going to be too bad at all, because now Toronto Defiant, they have a choice to make. Do they want to take one really good fight or play it twice?
Oh, the knife
back?
pull! That was on Chorong. The rest of Toronto have to follow this up, and they even throw the Hopper Rampage on top. This hits about 3 of London as they back away towards their own spawn. Toronto do not want to overextend past this archway. This is a London zone, especially with the spawns that close. So Toronto really don't end up killing or doing much with that Rampage.
Toronto's style of play here on point B has now been forced. They have to play for 2 fights. There's a rail that's charged on up. He wants Twilight, and he gets Twilight!
Twilight was looking at Backbone, but the match made in heaven was between Sparker and him. The overclock's still available, but you don't even need it. He's charging up off the tank, and London taking kill after kill, and Sparker is performing at LAN. 1 fight away for London to take the map.
The younger players on London Spitfire, we wondered after mid-season madness, were they going to be a team who would have these questionable performances on LAN? Someone's got to come in and touch this cart. We cannot have yet another absconding from the objective. And yes, it's a touch.
Oh, thank God, but there's a disruptor shot there. Don't be allergic to it. Hoppa has to anchor for his team. They need to heal him up, but Twilight is dead right before the rally! The London Spitfire overwhelmed them, and they Spitfire indeed. They're on match point.
For London Spitfire want to once again repeat history of a 3-1 that echoes in the minds of Toronto Defiant players, fans, and backroom alike. Fear begins to set into the nerves, but they are going to have a longer halftime here, Lemon. This is the moment that backrooms are made for. This is what a head coach does. You don't need the head coach for strategy. You need them to be a leader. You need them to be the rock, the anchor that your team clings to when you are in dire straits and you are facing down the barrel of a gun. And right now, Toronto Defiant, they're facing down the barrel of a large bore aircraft cannon from the London Spitfire.
You got to look to Twilight to unite this team. The C9 might have boomed them a little bit, but they delivered a C9 of their own. I mean, London whiffed a bit of back on Ilios. So, I mean, all things are even, but it's match point for the London Spitfire. Will this chapter end the same way it did last time? We'll find out after this break. baby. And we're so glad to be here in Toronto with all of you. It's going to be an amazing week/weekend, a couple of days. And the London Spitfire ain't changing the script that the Overwatch had planned. Of course, 2-1 going exactly the same way as their last rematch, what, a week or something ago?
Yeah, am I watching reruns or something, Lemon? I was promised fresh content, but I think Sean Miller's just started reusing the script here now. Toronto Defiant, they want to break through the script and try and drag themselves up to an even scoreline. And in map number 5, we've had ourselves a halftime. And before the halftime, we talked about what the real value of a head coach is. And admittedly, Toronto Defiant dropped this. No more KDG. They have Moby Dick, I think, filling in as the interim head coach. We've also got these veterans in Hopper and Twilight, the avatars of the backroom, the senior players on the stage who are going to have to be working super hard to make sure Toronto's mental stays in line.
And when I talked to Moby Dick about just how the coaching structure and how just the backroom has improved over the season, because Toronto are getting better every step of the way. They actually have an horizontal kind of structure where they're not overstepping on each other. Moby Dick, Hoppa too, he directs the in-game stuff. But Moby Dick, he gives a general direction while the assistant coaches provide more individual stuff. But for them, it's about a new feedback sessions. There's a lot more trust in each other, and they just communicate about just an overall goal. And when everyone is involved in the plan to success, Toronto are just getting better, especially in a meta like this where team play is so important.
Heading over next to our push map, Lemon. And once again, it's going to be the choice of Toronto Defiant. We're in our tournament arc now. And this is where we really start to see the character of the backrooms come out as well, because we ask, are you playing towards your own strengths, or are you trying to play towards your opponent's weaknesses? Which of those do you prefer more when you're picking from the options that you have? Admittedly, for push, it's only 2 options at the moment. You can either go to New Queen Street, the home ground for Toronto Defiant, or Colosseo over in Italy.
What is happening? Hottie!
All right.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Oh, he keeps going. 11,
He's got
12. He's been working. I heard from Nuki, this guy works out every day.
Yeah.
This is Chatty, live. This is what you're paying to see, everybody.
Get your money's worth, baby.
I lost count.
It's been a real transformation for Huddy as well this year. Like, he talks about how he's working out every day. It matters so much to these players as well to not only be healthy in terms of their gameplay style, but also physically and mentally healthy. It brings so much to the table. And Hardy's saying in chat, yeah, just a quick pump, you know. Got to get that LAN intimidation. I mean, we take a little bit of that on LAN, a couple shenanigans, a little bit of tomfoolery. You could intimidate the enemy by showing off your physical prowess on stage.
Who's our most shredded player of the match when it comes to Toronto? Like, we gotta have some counter pump happening. Like, if I was that tank, I don't care if I can do 3 push-ups. I'm getting on the ground and I'm doing the same thing. But I mean, London Spitfire, it's all about mental with them. Like I've already talked about in the pre-show. It's the confidence that was kind of lacking at the start of the season, at the start of this meta, because it's a big adjustment. Even though they were the Rush Kings, it's still a different way to play Rush when you don't have a shield and etc. There's a lot of resources, but we go to the next map now.
Colosseo is an interesting choice here. It's a much worse record for Toronto Defiant compared to New Queen Street, but I wonder if they're trying to force London Spitfire into their own wacky racers fun timeline where they like to play the May, because London Spitfire, they've had a pretty good level of success on Colosseo. A lot of that, admittedly, was for Reinhardt May, and to a large degree that's because the geometry of this map is so well suited towards May wall boosting, where you can just get up onto these high grounds that are assumed safe using with less mobile characters like a May, like a Junqueen, like a Reinhardt, by using the May wall for the boost. I think London Spitfire, though, after those last 2 maps, they're going to be fairly confident in just remaining on the Genji and the Sojourn and forcing Toronto Defiant to actually try and play towards them. And one of the things that was actually a hallmark, a little bit of a meme for this composition in the first week was on Colosseo. We saw like a 3-minute stalemate. We had ourselves a Battle of Ypres, a Somme, some trench warfare.
I died of old age. Like, sometimes that happens. And
the thing is here, Toronto Defiant, they would like one of those slow fights.
Well, this could be potentially your final map of the series. Everyone, give Toronto your energy. They're going to need it. It's match point for London, and Sparker versus Hisu again. And Hisu, he do be sticking on the Ashe.
A wider split here from London Spitfire, maybe trying to wrap around and take away the space from Hisu before we can even start to use it. Just making sure that Toronto have to continually make these rotations and potentially leave Hisu behind us. He's going to have a lot more trouble actually joining them. Oh no, that's bad.
How does Twilight die first? London just sail past Hoppa. They don't know wall him, and they're constantly just finding picks on these supports. Toronto have to keep their head in the game because this first fight goes to London.
Well, there's a reason, Lemon, why no one wanted to pick London Spitfire. If they left Toronto Defiant, our 4th seed, to have that rematch.
Oh, the headshot.
Oh, and it's Backbone as well with just the pure mechanics, the headshots. And we began this stage, Lemon, wondering if Backbone could even cut it as the Genji. But trust me, he's cutting through Toronto Defiant just fine, mate.
They really needed to scout that Backbone was just on that wall. The fact that he was putting free poke, and Hisu didn't even know he was there. There wasn't a coach gun until Hisu was basically dead. So it's maybe up to Torong or Twilight to get a whip shot or some kind of disruption onto Backbone. And that's been kind of Toronto's game plan, is to punish Backbone, but they haven't been successful at doing that. I mean, he's so swift, and the confidence exudes from London. They are very low, though. Oh, 30 HP in a dream. Backbone still lives.
Hisu taken down by Admiral. The Frog goes rogue. Hardy might well be followed in here, but still can use the shout at his leisure, and there it is. The speed boost given forth, and that's for support seen, and support's executed.
Bring me that Chorong. Where is he going? It took forever to Hadi to get him, but that's 2 fights in a row, 35 meters, and now growing. This is dangerous.
Moving in towards that checkpoint, Lemon. Toronto Defiant are going to have to be very judicious when they take that next engagement. I believe that although was the last to die, so they are going to be able to move in as 5 here with a blade in hand. London Spitfire, they get aggressive!
Oh, Backbone said nah. Just kidding. I was pranking you. But Toronto, I mean, they're so close to their own spawn, and that's maybe checkpoint for London. 65 meters, although wants to end the road here. He uses the blade, gets countered by the Admiral's sound barrier, as Toronto now use theirs to engage after Backbone already used his blade. Can Toronto actually get any kills? That's the million-dollar question. They collapse on the land, and Sparker is done with. Toronto get their first fight win of Colosseo, but not after giving up 65 meters.
So the overall plan there from London Spitfire, of course, was to try and zone Toronto Defiant back to allow themselves to get that checkpoint with only the singular ultimate. But the thing is, Toronto Defiant, they disengaged so well because they only used Hopper's Shout rather than using either of their support ultimates. Chirong held on to the sound barrier, and that meant that all those blades could be reinforced, and London Spitfire simply did not have the means to try and rebuff all, though, when all of Toronto Defiant fell upon them like a red wave.
Toronto need to win this fight if they want to match up the score. Twilight has the rally, maybe wanting to save this for the Hadi Rampage. Hadi, I mean, the lane is there, the red carpet is set. They want to keep Aldo in check. There's a Rampage from Hadi. It only hits the supports. Hoppa's hits Hadi and Backbone, and Sparker's done with as well. Trades back and forth, 4 versus 4, but any loss for Toronto is so critical. They're the furthest away from home when it comes to this map, and they just can't keep this going unless they get an insane punish. But Hisu is taking so much pressure. Finally, London leave him alone. They have to heal up themselves as Toronto are just barely holding on to this spot.
Hopper's so far away right now, though, Lemon, so there are only 4 players from Toronto Defiant who can really take advantage of this. That means Backbone isn't too uncomfortable in just trying to contest Timothy alone right now and just stop Toronto Defiant from getting that objective progress. Now both of our teams are getting back towards 5 members, but Landon's quite far away. Toronto Defiant need to take their opportunity now.
Toronto have to fight now that Landon is just getting back, and Hoppa is back in the picture, and Twilight is getting pushed by 2 or 3 members of London. Where is the appeal from Toronto? They're trying to counter dive. They're trying to do the same thing to Admiral and Landon, but they're unperturbed. And Toronto, they go for the closet, and they re-emerge with a blade, but it's shut down by Hadi and the sound barrier of Admiral. It just seems impossible for Toronto to get ahead, and London, they take back the bot.
You may have 1,000-folded steel, but I've got Shardy's special axe, and it thirsts for blood, baby. Shardy with 2 Carnage kills in that fight. London Spitfire, they really understood the timing there, knowing that they had a man disadvantage against Toronto Defiant because Landon wasn't back yet. They went for an early engage with the overclock to try and keep Toronto Defiant from flowing over.
Well, that's a bob from Hisu, just to kind of support them a little bit more and get London off the bot. Here's a blade from Backbone, supported by the Landon rally, countered by the sound barrier of Chorong. No kills quite yet, not even anyone low. That's a good dash from Backbone to get Toronto about at half health, and Twilight was just 10% off of the rally. That might have been that extra push that Toronto needed, but London are looking to extend this lead even more.
Excellent pathing there from London. We've talked about how important it was to their Reinhardt compositions before, but to be able to disengage from that, oh, the Bob, Hisu's given it up. Well, the Bob that was used now,
that was
Hisu's
promised.
given up the Ash. Hisu's gone to the Sojourn. He's admitted that Toronto Defiant, they need to change the tempo, they need to change the style. London have figured out how to play against the Ash, but do they know about the Hisu Sojourn?
Oh, Hottie's in your back line, and he's coming for you. Toronto, they have the rally, they immediately use it. Hottie tries to deny some of those resources with the Rampage, and although already falls, and Toronto cannot afford to give up any more meters on this push. What a boop. Hotba is gone. London seem ahead for now as Backbone's hoping, was trying to get punished by Twilight, but it's a Backbone that had the last laugh. London are climbing to 90 meters plus. And with almost 4 minutes left, you don't want to call it yet, but Toronto are in danger.
This is so dangerous for Toronto. The 3-1 repetition, it's Siren Song calls. Toronto Defiant dare not steer into those pointy rocks. They must straighten the ship, and they must take this now.
Although almost got the assassination on the Sparker, but this is a London fight with the sound barrier first, and Hoppa falling over before he could set up the Rampage. We're in full cap territory. It's red alert here in Canada, and not the red that Toronto wanted. London approach the final destination for the match win, and the final chapter to be closed. And Toronto, they can approach with the Rampage. Few more meters to go. And where is Hoppa? Where is our star? Hisu's the one who shines. Overclock at a distance will stop London from the full capture.
3 minutes to save a winner's bracket run for Toronto Defiant. This is the meta where they have proven themselves to be a team of elites. This is one of the best support lines we have in the world for this meta. But still, the resources are not all there just yet. The Blade last time was shut down so well by Hardy. All those gonna have to be so careful about his spacing against the Junker Queen and maybe try and take out Landon early.
Although with the Blade, he needs your support, and he goes after Landon, the supports of London. Without that rally, can London survive? But the clap back even harder. Although, and the supports of Toronto toast, as they were hoping to make this back-to-back fights, and they need to go for almost a full capture with the 135 meters that London have.
Admiral managing to get himself a couple of final blows there, but the real boogeyman here, it's Sparker with the overclock. So many maps of Toronto Defiant, 2 series in a row, Lemon, have been decided by Sparker, just deciding that the railgun means everything. Timmy's on the move, Toronto Defiant, they've set up the blockade. The Bulwark has been laying up, but only 1 minute and 45 remains.
Well, Hottie is planning to do push-ups on the Toronto Graves. It's barrier v barrier, and overclock to pierce through Twilight, who tries to close the gap, but can't seem to get close enough to Sparker. But the front line of London has been overwhelmed as they tried to go a little too deep to go for the full capture in front of the Canadian fans. But Toronto ended here, but it's still a long road to try and match another 100 meters to go.
For London, though, it wasn't a huge investment. They used the overclock, they used the rally, but still the sound barrier, the Rampage, the Blade, the 3 most important ultimates are waiting in the wings. Twilight, how aggressive does he have to be with the rally here to try and make London Spitfire disengage? But the question is, how willing are London Spitfire to just give away that space? Because they've got so much distance to play with, and Toronto Defiant only have 1 minute to save themselves.
Here's Hottie with a Rampage soon. Tries to go after the back line, although applying pressure behind. Backbone 14 HP. How does he do it? The Blade draws out the healing of Toronto, and the ult's on top, but it's London making a pain a sandwich as Toronto fall yet again. London take back control of the bot, and there's only 30 seconds left.
Oh, it's the signature swap. Twilight's on his Anna, baby. It's the signature from Twilight. He's got the range to work with, but he doesn't have the time. And Toronto Defiant, they've only got the 1 ultimate to try and make work. The anti will be delivered, yes, from Twilight, but can although follow up upon it with the Blade. Watch for the anti. It hits Backbone.
Oh, and you got the punish onto the London supports. That's all Toronto needed. Finally, although, gets the pop off, but London got some trades, and you got to stay on this card. Perfection is demanded of Toronto if they want to force another map.
Hisu has to take the bot away from the remaining members of Toronto Defiant, though. And Timmy moves so fast, he moves at the pace of a person walking alongside it. And so Toronto Defiant, they may find themselves in a shambles as they try and get up here. Toronto, yes, is going to start taxiing Twilight. The question is, can Toronto Defiant find the space for Twilight to work if he needs a longer range for this? Anna cannot afford to get into a close range battle with a London Spitfire. And Spitfire, they can bully out Toronto with only their sound barrier here because you only need to win one.
And Twilight's ready with the anti, hits Hottie with it. The sound barrier from Admiral starts to engage off nice for London. There's a sleep on the Sparker. Can he still get the finishing blow? He doesn't. Without that main take of Hot Dog, Toronto! What happens? Chorong misses the beat, but London don't miss this beat. They take the series just like they did last time, 3-1.
In front of a home crowd, let him just call himself villains. He's pushing up on the graves of Toronto Defiant. Yes, there may be a loser's bracket, but that does not mean that Toronto Defiant will be any less devastated by history once more, bringing itself back around, Lemon.
Just London, the confidence exudes from them. The way Backbone was a thorn in their backside. He is constantly harassing, going after the supports. I felt like Hoppa was probably at the least amount of deaths because of how much he's been ignored. He had the invisibility cloak on him as London stepped past and always went after that leader of Twilight, and you kind of saw the fight break down for Toronto. Not only throughout most of the maps, but in communications, when you had that C9 happen on Dorado. That's not something Toronto usually do.
Yeah, Toronto, their communication lines, they kind of broke down at points like we saw. That lack of touch on Dorado, that's going to echo through their memories for all of tonight. And especially going into that lower bracket match later on in the tournament, it's going to be something that honestly is going to be heartbreaking for them to do that in front of their home crowd as well. Toronto Defiant, it's a heartbreaker, but London Spitfire, this is a good turnaround for them after a mid-season madness performance that definitely didn't live up to expectation.
It's a lower bracket run for Toronto. Their story doesn't end here, and their goal of being the #1 Canadian team is still alive. And we have a special treat for everyone. We're going to send it over to Danny on the stage with an interview.
Thank you guys so much. Yes, this is a very special treat. We got Sparker from London Spitfire for the post-match interview. How are you doing?
I'm good.
You're good?
First experience on stage.
First experience on stage. I mean, I guess I'll start my interview with that question because this is London Spitfire's first ever LAN. So how did it feel to be, you know, in front of the crowd playing Overwatch?
It's a surreal experience. Like, everything is shaking. You hear this. You hear everyone screaming in the background, booing and cheering, and yeah, it's a crazy experience, really.
I'm just gonna let you know that booing is probably gonna continue because you're not Toronto.
Yeah.
I mean, you said you were a little nervous and shaky, but I don't think that showed at all on camera and on your performance. Now, this match, I think, because it was a rematch from the qualifiers last week. Were you guys extra sort of confident that you guys could beat Toronto Defiant because you guys already have beaten them before?
Yeah, we think we're better overall at the current meta, and I think we just played our game and we thought we would win automatically.
Okay, all right. And last but not least, because of this win, you guys will be facing off against the Dallas Fuel, our #1 seed currently. Do you have any fighting words for the Dallas Fuel to the camera?
We're gonna beat them next game.
All right, that is it for Sparker, everybody. Give it up for Sparker one more time. That is it. That is all I have here. All right, let's send things back to our casters, Lemon Day and Leg Kiwi.
Oh, I like that. They're so creative. They're just so creative on the desk. Yeah, great interview. I mean, I would be honestly intimidated when the opponent starts doing push-ups right before the final map. So 3-1 ends the scoreline for London, and you kind of heard from Sparker of just the nerves were there, the boos were there, but it didn't affect their performance.
I mean, you know what was there? I take partial credit. The Brits on London Spitfire, Christopher and Backbone, they were missing the bickies from back home. I brought them over in my suitcase. I bought them some special biscuits, and well, the homesick went away, and the homestand win came to them.
The bias over here, just feeding the enemy.
All right, Canadian.
Be quiet. But there is one person who is very loud this match. You just saw him on stage. Your player of the match is Sparker, of course.
Duh. So many maps are just turned around. I mean, this is almost a legacy player of the match as well. Over the last 2 matchups between Toronto Defiant and London Spitfire, Sparker has just been the Sandman in their nightmares, who continually put them into these eternal slumbers, eternal rests. And let's not forget about possibly the most valuable disruptor shot in the entirety of this meta, even in the entirety of Sojourn's competitive history, to force that C9 on Dorado.
And even just being able to shoot a skatey boy like Churong, that's kind of nuts. I mean, Sparker is able to convert on multi-kills almost every single overclock. He commits the overclock to deal with Hisu's Bob. I mean, we even get to see Bob for more than 3 seconds at a time. It even forces Hisu to go to Sojourn on that last map. And the stats speak for itself. I mean, Sparker, before this match, was top 3 in terms of railgun accuracy. He has very low deaths, which tells me that although wasn't able to really gap close and go after him, even Twilight you saw in Colosseo tried to step up just to harass Sparker, and they never